Hello everybody, this is Addie Cron Podfix, back with another video. This is part 3 of Our Broken Repair Boy. This will be chapters 5 and 6, and this story is by Just Your Weird Average Fangirl on podfic.net. Some trigger warnings for this story are themes of depression, self-harm, abuse, death, and anxiety are expressed throughout this story. If you are triggered by any of these things, don't listen to this. Leo stepped out of the bathroom and almost immediately walked into the Son of Poseidon. "Oh, sorry," he said. "Are you okay?" Percy asked. He sounded pretty concerned, but Leo couldn't imagine why. "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" he asked. "I heard you throwing up," Percy said. Leo cursed silently, careful not to let his mask fall. "Yeah, I think I have a stomach bug or something. I'm sure it'll be fine soon." Percy looked unconvinced. "You were fine before." Leo held back an eye roll. "Yeah, it was just because I ate just now. It got worse." Percy sighed heavily. "Sure, Leo, just be careful, okay? Rest." Leo smiled. Fake. All fake. "Will do, Aquaman." This time, Percy was not so easily convinced. "You better. I'll keep an eye on you and make sure that you actually are." "Sure thing," Leo said. "Gotta go, I need to fix some stuff." Before Percy could reply, he darted around him and walked down the corridor at a leisurely pace. He broke into a sprint as soon as he had turned the corner. He burst into the engine room and slammed the door shut behind him. He allowed himself a few seconds to wallow in his own misery before he sighed and walked over to the blueprints. He bent over the sheets and started to work. He didn't stop for another 8 hours. Leo rubbed his stinging eyes. He had been working for 8 hours straight, and he was exhausted. But he had to keep working. What else was he good for? Just as he thought this, there was a knock at the door. "Come in," he called. Percy opened the door and walked in. Leo cursed internally. He had been doing that a lot as of late. "Hey, Waterboy, what's up?" he asked, shooting him a grin. "Hey, Leo," Percy replied. "I just came to check that you've been resting like I told you to." He placed light emphasis on the last few words. "Yeah, I've been resting plenty," Leo lied. Percy walked over to where he was working and looked at the pages covered in writing. He scanned the room, looking at the various new inventions scattered. Diver the room. Okay, whatever. Doesn't look like it. Why did the guy have to be so perceptive? Stuff isn't always what it looks like, Leo said. "I did take breaks." Percy looked like he didn't believe him, but he let the matter drop and changed the subject. "It's time for dinner. You skipped lunch." Leo blinked in surprise. "I did?" "You did. Now you need to eat," Percy said firmly. "Come on." Leo sighed and followed the demigod out of the room. Leo and Percy walked in the dining hall. Leo didn't miss how the rest of the crew noticed him when he was with Percy, but not when he was alone. "Hey, come sit down," Annabeth called. Percy sat down next to her, and Leo sat down at the end of the table next to Hazel. Leo ate as fast as he could, longing to get back to his plans. He'd been working on monster-proof phones for the Seven and Coach Hedge, and he needed to get to work on those. As soon as he was done eating, he stood up and went over to the coffee machine. He was going to need a lot of coffee if he wanted to get this done. Unfortunately, it didn't go unnoticed. "Are you done already?" Percy asked. He had been keeping an irritatingly close eye on Leo the whole time. "Yeah, I need to get back to something. I've been working on something which could be really useful." "What is it?" Hazel asked, sounding genuinely interested. Monster-proof phones for all of us in Coach Hedge." Leo said. "I thought it could be helpful to be able to communicate without using up darkness." "Really?" Annabeth asked. "That would be so useful, Leo. Thank you." He gave her a quick smile before sipping some coffee and leaving the room. Leo was exhausted. He had been up for hours, and now it was 4 a.m. He still hadn't had a single minute of sleep, and he seemed to have built up an immunity to coffee. He quickly put everything away safely so that nothing would blow up, and left the engine room. He made his way to his cabin, stumbling slightly. As soon as he reached his cabin, he fell into the bed fully clothed. He knew he should probably get changed, but he was absolutely exhausted. Almost straight away, his eyes closed, and he fell into the clutches of sleep, and consequently, of nightmares. Lexi sat next to him, laughing at her own joke, and he'd always loved that about her. She never cared what anyone else thought. He looked at her and smiled. She was so beautiful, her dark brown hair loose around her shoulders. He had always loved her eyes. They stood out against her skin tone and made you want to stare at her for all of eternity. Lexi looked at him, and their eyes met. Her smile faded, and they spent a few seconds just staring into each other's eyes before she broke the silence. "Why won't you let me tell you something?" "You can't," Leo said. "She'll kill you." "I don't care," Lexi replied. "I just want her to stop hurting you." "Well, if you died, it would hurt me more than anything else," Leo said. "You'd move on," Lexi said, sounding slightly sad about it. "No, I wouldn't," Leo disagreed. "You know that." He held up his wrist with a small infinity symbol tattooed on the side. "I love you for infinity, remember?" Lexi smiled at him lovingly and held up her wrist with the matching tattoo. Infinity. He leaned in and kissed her, and she kissed him back. When they broke apart, Lexi looked away from him mournfully, so he couldn't see her face. "What's wrong?" Leo asked. He hated seeing her so sad. "You have to move on," Lexi said. Leo frowned. "What do you mean, move on? Move on from what?" From me, Lexi said. What do you mean? You're right here, Leo said, starting to feel uneasy. No, I'm not, she said. She turned to face him again, and Leo's heart seemed to drop due to horror. She had blood splattered all over her face and a line of red across her throat. I'm dead, remember? Leo awoke with a start. All right, this is chapter 6. There's a panic attack, so that's the warning. He launched himself out of bed, breathing heavily and covered in sweat. Tears poured down his face, but he didn't try to wipe them away. Lexi, his star, his love. He staggered backwards and bumped into his dresser. It went crashing to the floor, and the drawers spilled out. He distantly felt a sharp jab of pain in his ankle where the wood hit him, but he ignored it. He was too deep into the panic attack. Dead because of him. His breaths came faster and faster. His breaths came faster and faster until he was hyperventilating as if he had just run a marathon. He heard footsteps faintly. Merda. He must have forgotten to close the door properly last night and his house would fall asleep. Now he wished he had never even closed his eyes. He tried to focus on moving to the bathroom so that nobody would see him, but his vision started to crowd with black spots. One thing stood out in the dark, a small sliver of light, a razor blade, splattered with blood. This was enough to make him stumble over to the small blade, grab it, and practically crawl to the bathroom. He closed the door and climbed into the shower, turning it on with the water almost boiling. He realized too late that he still had his clothes on. Oh well. He curled up against the side of the shower. His tears were starting to mix with the water from the shower, and every breath came faster and heavier. Self-harm. He pressed the blade to his wrist and dragged it with all his strength across the tanned skin. Blood came quickly, quicker than normal. It didn't stop or slow, not even when he made 9 more cuts. He realized that he must have hit a vein. That meant he would probably die. He was slightly surprised at how little this bothered him. I'll finally see Lexi again. His vision was starting to fade out, and his mind was foggy. He tried to recall his name, but he found he was unable to. Not as though that would matter where he was going. The door opened. A girl walked in silently. Leo's breath caught. The girl's hair flowed like a waterfall down her back, and she was barefoot, dressed in a simple blue flowing top and black leggings. Standing before him was Alexis. Lexi, he mumbled. Shh, save your energy, she said as she walked to him and knelt down next to him. Her voice was just as gentle and caring as he remembered, slightly accented with the Venezuelan roots. His eyes filled with tears all over again. Lexi, I'm so sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry, lo siento. She shushed him and stroked his hair lovingly. It wasn't your fault, mi amor. You hold no blame. I should have saved you, Leo said, his voice cracking. If it wasn't for me, you'd be alive right now. I don't care, Lexi said. I've been able to watch over you, age with you, stay with you all these years. I wouldn't be able to do that if I were still alive. Leo started to speak, but Lexi cut him off. That's not why I came. I wanted to tell you I don't blame you, and I still love you. I always will. A tear slipped down Leo's cheek. I love you too. I love you for infinity. Lexi smiled at the sound of their old term of endearment. I love you for infinity, she replied, and kissed his cheek. Just then, Leo heard a knock on the door in the other room and heard someone come in. Leo, is everything okay? I heard a crash. The voice trailed off. I have to go now, Lexi said. Leo shook his head vehemently. Don't leave me. Don't worry, Lexi said. I'll see you again. Maybe not soon, but someday. She gave him one last kiss on the cheek before she turned and walked away. She stopped just before she reached the door and turned to look at him. Tears shone in her velvet eyes. I love you for infinity, she said. I love you for infinity, Leo repeated for the last time in his life, and she turned and walked out the door. Leo leaned his head back, tears running down his face. The blood was pooling around him, and he really felt the blood loss. He still couldn't remember his name. Only Lexi. That was all he could really remember. Just Lexi. A bang on the door started him out of his blood-loss-induced trance. He looked over at the door, noticing how everything was fuzzy. He didn't have long left. Leo, I can hear the shower. Are you all right? The voice called through the door. If you don't answer or open the door, I'm coming in. The voice had a warning tone now. There was a few seconds of silence, in which Leo's vision only got blurrier. Thud! There was a bang on the door, followed by another one before the door burst open. A boy, with messy dark hair and bright green eyes, walked in. He gasped and sprinted over to Leo. I wonder who that is, Leo mused. He seemed panicked. Oh my God, it's Leo. I'm going to get the others. No, Leo mumbled. He didn't know who the others were. He just knew that anybody seen like this couldn't be good. The boy hesitated before standing up and turning the water off. He grabbed a towel from the rack next to him and draped it over Leo. I have to at least get Annabeth, he said. Stay with me, Leo, please. We need you. This confused him. Why would anybody need him? He was worthless, just the repair boy who couldn't stop messing up and getting people killed. Everything he did was wrong. He was never good enough, always useless. The boy looked at him, seeming saddened. Leo still couldn't think why, but the boy ran off before he could ask, and Leo was alone again. Percy skidded to a stop in front of Annabeth's cabin and banged on the door as hard as he could. She opened the door fairly quickly. Seaweed braid? What's wrong? Her eyes widened. Oh my God, is that blood? Are you okay? I'm fine. It's not my blood. It's Leo. I need your help. Annabeth didn't hesitate to grab the medical supplies, bandages, medicine, etc., and they ran towards Leo's cabin. The door burst open again. Leo was really starting to get sick of the loud noises, of thinking that he would finally die and then people finding him. The boy was back, with a blonde girl this time. She gasped. It sounded almost like a sob. Leo! She walked towards him as fast as she could and pulled out some bandages. She pressed a cloth to the cuts on his wrist. Leo groaned and tried to squirm away. I know, but I have to stop the bleeding. I'm sorry, Leo. This was the last thing he heard before his vision finally gave out, and he fell into unconsciousness. He opened his eyes to a bright light. Oh, not like the one in his room. Oh, wait, this was his room. He closed his eyes again and opened them again, trying to adjust to the light. He turned his head to the side and saw Annabeth reading a book next to him. The fact that he recognized her now did not escape his notice. Annabeth? He slurred. She looked up from her book and smiled at him gently. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Hey there, Chico de Fuego. He noted the new nickname, Chico de Fuego, Boy of Fire. Annabeth, She interrupted him. It's okay. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Sleep. He wanted to protest, but his eyelids grew heavy, and before long, he had slipped into a dreamless sleep. Alright, and that was chapters 5 and 6 of Our Broken Repair Boy. I will see you next week. Alright, bye. Hope you enjoyed.